Very short. Let me see, did I broke your microphone? Did I broke it?
You can just hold it.
Much better.
There you go.
Oh my gosh, this is a wonderful crowd. Thank you so much for showing up. And I know that many of you probably wanted to see Javier Zamora, but Javier is asleep. I just sent him a video and I said, where are you? You live 10 minutes from here. Get over here. But I am sure he is somewhere in the world. He's been traveling with his amazing, amazing memoir. What is beautiful about Javier is that he is sort of my adopted son, because I met him in 2017, 2018, when Javier was trying to figure out how to finish his memoir. He got stuck, he says, because it was painful and it was hard to finish the writing of his memoir. So I get a phone call from one of reporter or journalist from Guatemala, and he said, do you have some time to share with this young man from El Salvador? And as soon as I heard El Salvador, yeah, it's my people. So I said, of course. So I get this very young, wonderful, good-looking man in my house for like 2 hours and a half. We talk, we laugh, we cry. He asked me to tell him my journey, what happened to Dora and her journey. And it was amazing. And then next to him was this beautiful, very tall woman. And I said, is she your girlfriend? And he said, no, but now it's his wife. So I think I guessed. But it was amazing. So Javier was asking me all these questions about my journey and immigration. And at the end, Javier said, would you let one of your kids to go alone in this journey? And I thought, I didn't know how to answer. And all I said is, I don't know, maybe if it was life and death, I would have let my little boy go alone. And I didn't know that he was writing this memoir. A couple months later, Javier went to my house, he had dinner with us, and he says, I'm finished up my book, and thank you because I was stuck. So I feel so honored to know him. I feel so honored to read his book, and I relate in so many ways with his journey. And I just wanted to give him the highlight of this night, because he is an amazing writer, a human being, a kind person that I very love very much. As the same, I love this guy over here. John Pipe has been one of the most amazing mentors in my life. I am in the humanitarian world because I had the best teacher in the world, which is Reverend John Pipe. Thank you. Thank you. He not only saved thousands and thousands of people from my country in Guatemala in 1980, when I was displaced from my own country as a 19-year-old. Many of you know the story. The book is out. It is a book that reflects, tragedy, resiliency, and hope. Because I have found hope in giving back. And giving back to people that is displaced from the place they know. See, none of us, when we leave our countries, are getting up in the morning and saying, oh, I'm going to go to America. No, we live because we have to. It's a life or death situation. And when you leave behind what you know, your family, your mother, your brothers, your sisters, your culture, your food, it's not easy to live with that for the rest of your life. The toughest thing I ever done in my life was with my mother behind. And there's a chapter in my book that is called Mama, I Must Leave. Because I did this journey 3 times to safety. And then in order to get here, to fight for my life and my family, I had to come the illegal way. None of us, they had no way to get a tourist visa, will come the legal way. We must go through the tough way to get to the United States. But what we're doing in the moment is exercising our rights. Exercising the right to be safe. Looking for a better life, which is not a crime. We must remember that. But I thank you so much. It's not for me. I want Reverend Five to tell you how I met him and how old I was. It was beautiful to work alongside with him 2 years later after I was rescued from the desert in 1980 in July. I was rescued in the desert of Arizona, where 13 of my friends died crossing by Oregon Pike, and I am one of the survivors. And I became part of this beautiful movement that saved lives and following your steps. Thank you so much for that. Because I know many of the families that they saved probably never saw you again. But they're here because you, the sanctuary movement, did what was right. And what was right was to go against the political world at the moment that was shutting the doors to people fleeing a war. A war that was financed by the United States. A war, a civil war that killed more than 75,000 people in my country and displaced 1 million of us. And it was not a communist war. It was a war of poor people fighting for their rights. So thank you. I know that many people is around this country having children or already with grandkids like me at that time. But I could not ever say thank you enough to the sanctuary movement that was led by Reverend John Five in this country. And it's worldwide. And going back from then to now, we are still practicing the sanctuary in our community that I love so much. Thank you, thank you.
You just want to stay there, you want to go. No.
Oh, that.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to say something fun that you might laugh. This picture, I was 19. So if you get the book and you said, oh, who's this young girl? Well, that's me in the back. I told my son, who is the graphic designer for my cover for the book, please make sure you put a picture of me in the back so we don't deceive our readers.
Keep an eye on me. I have a number of people in my congregation who said, if you see the pastor looking at his watch when he starts the sermon, pay no attention because it don't mean a damn thing. I'll keep an eye on it.
You got all the time you want.
Yeah. Very
Table
easy.
stuff.
I want to give credit to folks who went before us, Dora. Southern Arizona and southern New Mexico have a long and honorable tradition of organizing for social justice and for the rights of workers and for human rights. That has existed for generations in this part of the borderlands. And we simply leaned on that whole history of organizing in the copper mines and among the Mexican population that was here before most of us, and for the Native American population that still is struggling for basic fundamental rights in this territory. But that whole history of organizing was deeply leaned on by all of us who were confronting the increasing migration of folks from Central America during the late 1970s and early 1980s. And when we began, Dora gets a great deal of credit because the tragedy in Oregon Pipe Cactus National Monument that Dora was a part of. Thank you. Kick it again, Tom, because it goes back on. Historians and journalists have said from the very beginning that tragedy in Oregon Pipe Cactus National Monument and the survivors that came to Tucson were the beginning of what became the sanctuary movement and the now international movement to do a very simple and assert a very simple human right, and that is the right, if your life is threatened, to flee and to find political asylum in the legal term, sanctuary, and a welcoming community where you flee to. That was not the case in 1980 in Tucson or the rest of the United States, because the United States government had undertaken 5 decades occupation and influence in Central America, and had equipped a military and trained a military to make certain that those countries' population and economy were geared fundamentally in support of the needs and the mandates of the United States. And so, when a revolution in Nicaragua resulted in the overthrow of the dictator there, and that whole history of dominance by the United States. The United States was frightened that might also occur in El Salvador, in Guatemala, and other places in Latin America. And so they trained and equipped the military to put down any revolution. And the result, as Dora said, was that thousands of people were killed by the military and the death squads, and that about 1 million people fled for their very lives. And as they fled, they came the traditional migration pattern here in the southwest border of the United States. And we were alerted to that by the tragedy that happened in in Oregon Pike Baptist Nationwide. And we got some church folk together and said, what must we do? And the danger, of course, was that they would be deported immediately back to military interrogation and documentation at the airport, and as history has certified, many people did not even survive that intelligence screen at the airport. So we provided the basic needs for these new refugees who had just arrived. Lawyers to ask for political asylum and file their appropriate papers, and support the social workers and community support for the survivors, and care for them. But it was a learning experience for all of us here. I said at one point, I couldn't even put El Salvador on a map. I knew it was somewhere in Central America. That was the extent of my knowledge. But we realized after talking with Dora and the other survivors that they were here for everything that had been written into international law and United States law to provide political asylum for refugees. So we set about to do that. And one of the things we did was to begin a legal aid effort to enable people who deserve political asylum to apply and to be represented in court. And the Tucson Ecumenical Council, which was all of the mainline Protestant churches in Tucson, and the Catholic Diocese of Tucson have come together to be the hub of that relationship between Monzo Area Council and Lupe Castillo and Margot Cowan, who were providing legal representation for immigrants in the community, and the church. And the church, we quickly learned, was a primary target of the repression in El Salvador because of the work of Archbishop Romero, who had, as I understand Dora's story, just been gunned down saying mass by the military and the right wing of El Salvador just before Dora had left and fled. And that legal aid effort began here and then branched off to Southern California because everyone who was from El Salvador was being, as efficiently as possible, transferred out of Southern Arizona, and the help we were providing to the INS Detention Center in El Centro, California. And folks were being given a paper in English who were shipped there that said, I agree to waive all my rights under United States and international law, and I agree to be deported immediately to El Salvador. That process was deadly. And so we wound up with colleagues in Los Angeles providing legal representation from volunteers here in Tucson to go to El Centro and to provide legal aid there for folks who were threatened with deportation, and to provide them with bond funds. Folks remarkably donated not only money but put up their houses and properties for a bond fund to facilitate the bonding out of those folks so that they could represent themselves in court. And that legal aid effort was a way of gathering the community, church and law, to help people understand this unfolding tragedy that Dora had been so much of. And one of the guys who showed up was a guy by the name of Jim Corbett, who claimed he was a rancher in southern Arizona, and never said much about the fact that he graduated from Harvard in 4 years with a master's degree in philosophy with a straight 4.0. But it quickly became aware, all of us became aware of the fact that he was brighter than all the rest of us, and we should pay attention to what he was thinking. And what he was thinking was, he came to me after about 6 months as one of the volunteers for the Legal Aid Project and said to me, John, I believe that we don't have a choice. We're going to have to start helping refugees cross the border safely from Nogales, Arizona, to Tucson, Arizona, so that they're not captured. Because once they're captured, inevitably they're going to be deported back to El Salvador. And we know what that means. And he said, I've been talking to a priest in Nogales, Sonora, who's running a shelter there for Central American refugees. And we think we can coordinate the crossing of folks from here, from Nogales to here. And he said, I think we don't have a choice. We have to. Because their lives are on the line every day on this border. And once they're captured by Border Patrol, they're inevitably going to be deported. And I said, how do you figure that, Jim? And he said, well, look at two moments in history. First was, that he pointed out, was the abolition movement in the United States, when some people based in faith communities got together and formed what they called an underground railroad to move runaway slaves safely across state lines and to safer and safer places. And he said, John, as we read history, they got it right. They were faithful to their faith community, and they were right in terms of human rights and civil rights as well. And I said, well, yeah, that's how I read history, Jim. And then he pointed to almost the total failure of the church in Europe in the 1930s and 1940s to protect Jews and others who were fleeing the Holocaust. And he said that was a complete failure of faith by the church in Europe. And I said, well, yeah, Jim, that's how I read history. And then he looked me right in the eye, the bastard, and said, I don't think we can allow that to happen on our border in our time, can you, Jim? And under Jim's direction, I finally went to him after some sleepless nights and said, yeah, you're right. I'd have to burn my ordination as a pastor card that if I didn't say, okay, I'm in. And so a group of us, about 20 or 25 of us, began to cooperate with the priest in Nogales, Sonora, who referred families and individuals to us who he believed were at the highest risk if they were captured by Border Patrol. And we'd cross them and bring them, when we started, we brought them to our homes, of course, what else? And then our wives got together and threatened divorce. And we, Jim came to me again and said, John, can we bring him to your church? And after a long meeting, the elders of the church said, of course, we've never asked anyone for documents when they came here. We're not going to start now. And so the church became a place where not only folks we crossed, but other folks in the community learned that this was a safe place for refugees from El Salvador and then Guatemala as the repression unfolded in Guatemala in 1982. And that continued for almost a year. And then at a political asylum hearing, one of the government lawyers took aside Margot Cowan at a political asylum hearing and said to her, we figured out what Fife and Corbett are doing, tell them to stop it or we'll indict them. And then there was a series of meetings. What do we do now? And we only concluded that our only choice, we knew we couldn't stop. Lives were on the line on this border every day. And so the conversation turned to, well, this has been a very secretive smuggling operation, we thought, until Border Patrol intelligence figured it out. So we decided that we ought to go public before we were indicted, so at least this community and people would understand what the issue was and why we were helping people escape capture others. And in the midst of that conversation, I just, off the top of my head, said something about, well, maybe we could call this sanctuary. It's an old tradition. It's an old tradition in the medieval Europe and in the Roman Empire. So maybe we could call it sanctuary, and everybody thought it would be a good idea if it was my church that tried it first. And so we went through a process for about 3 months, helping people understand the faith and the law and our going public, what that might mean for all the people in the congregation. Took a vote by secret ballot in another long meeting of the congregation. And I had no idea what was going to happen. So we counted the ballots, and there were only 2 negative votes out of the whole congregation. And so on the anniversary of Archbishop Romero's assassination on March 24th of 1982, Southside Church declared itself a sanctuary. And during that long meeting, when we were discussing this in the congregation before the vote, a woman had stood up in the congregation and said, why just us? Why don't we ask other churches to join us? And I said, well, to tell you the truth, I've been so focused on this process, I hadn't even thought about it. But I will if you vote in the affirmative. We'll have to do that. And so when we declared sanctuary, 4 other congregations in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., New York, at any rate, had declared sanctuary at the same time. And then we began to get calls from all over the country. What's this sanctuary idea? And can we do that? And if we do that, can you send us a family that's staying in your church? And a whole new set of questions. You know? So Jim and I sat down with a map of the United States one afternoon on the floor and created what became known as the New Underground Railroad, a way to move refugees safely from crossing the border to not only churches but synagogues across the country who were understanding the need for the protection for these refugees. The question was, well, what does the church providing sanctuary for these folks? Is that lawful, or is it civil disobedience? Is it against the law, and should we look for an indictment coming down any moment now? And we assumed when we did it that it was in the tradition of Martin King and the civil rights movement. It was civil disobedience, and so we said that. And about a month after we declared sanctuary, I get a call in my office, and this guy says, my name is, I'm a human rights lawyer in New York, and you've got to stop talking about civil disobedience. You're not doing civil disobedience. And I said, really? I'm just waiting for the indictment because the government says they've got us under investigation. And if we're doing what we're doing, what we say we're doing, why they're gonna act and indict us. And he said, and this is a direct quote, he said, listen, dummy. He said, you're not violating United States law. The United States has just passed in 1980 the 1980 Refugee Act that assures the United States will never deport someone back to repression and war and any place their lives are in danger in that place. And that you will grant them, that the United States will grant them political asylum. Well, of course, the United States was not granting anyone who was from El Salvador, our allies, political asylum. And so he said, listen, dummy, it's not you that's violating the United States law, it's the United States government. And every time you say you're doing civil disobedience, people get it all mixed up. They don't understand. And I said, well, I think I understand, but what do we call what we're doing then? And he said, I don't know, make it up. So of course I went to Corbett and I told him about the phone call. He came back 2 days later with a I think 3 or 4 page document titled Civil Initiative. And it defines civil initiative as the legal right and the legal responsibility of every one of us, to directly protect the victims of human rights violations when the government violates human rights. Don't forget that, because we're right in the middle of the government violating the human rights of so many people here and on the border. Pay attention. And this movement grew beyond anything we ever imagined or could have. It grew to not only here in the United States, but sanctuary began to be practiced in Europe, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, in Israel, across the world, because so many human rights were being systematically violated by governments, and this became a resistance to that. Peaceful, nonviolent resistance to government violations of human rights is what this is. And of course, the government indicted a group of us from both sides of the border, including that Catholic priest in Nogales. And we thought this is going to be the opportunity to make this legal argument in court. But the judge who heard the case did not give us any chance to make that argument in his court. He denied our right to say anything in his courtroom to the charges against us. He said we could not mention the United States refugee law. We could not talk about international refugee law. We could not talk about conditions in El Salvador or conditions in Guatemala or our religious faith. So I didn't believe there was anything to do in the courtroom. So we changed our strategy, and the number of churches and synagogues and temples and mosques who declared sanctuary more than doubled during the time we were on trial. And we spent a lot of time with lawyers, and we were convinced of our legal position, despite the federal judge's rulings in our case here in Tucson. And so we sued the Attorney General in the United States as soon as our trial was over. And finally, the federal judge who was hearing the case, our civil case against the Attorney General for his failure to observe United States refugee law in his policies. Finally, the federal judge who was hearing our civil case gave us the right to put the Attorney General of the United States, head of the Immigration Service, and the Undersecretary of State for Human Rights under oath and take their depositions under oath. And within 24 hours, we get a call from the Justice Department in Washington saying, wouldn't you like to negotiate a settlement for this matter? And the settlement essentially accomplished what we set out. Settlement stopped all deportations to El Salvador and Guatemala, gave everyone who was here without documents from those two countries temporary protected status. And they agreed to a whole series of reforms of the political asylum process that have all been rolled back by the current politics of our country now. But we had a dance and called an end to the sanctuary movement. And within 2 years, the Border Patrol came up with a new border enforcement strategy here in the Southwest called Prevention Through Deterrence. And that doing, Francois?
It's up to you. As long as I got energy, then yeah.
You
I'm with you.
tell me.
Well, I'll tell you.
And that new border enforcement strategy was pretty simple for everyone to understand. It said that almost everyone crosses from Mexico into the United States through the urban areas, and there are only about 6 or 7 of them in the whole border between South Texas, California, and they said if we wall off those urban areas, quadruple the number of border patrol agents, and add all the technology we can to the enforcement strategy, we believe we can seal off those urban areas. And they said, and when we do that, we know what's going to happen. People are going to try to go around the edges. We'll build more walls, and we'll quadruple the number of border patrol agents again, and we'll push the enforcement out from those urban areas. And they said, when we do that, we know what's going to happen. People are going to still try to go around. What they succeeded in doing was deciding we're going to do this in Texas and California first, because they said under oath before a Senate committee that they believed that no one would try to cross through the Sonora Desert. It was too deadly, and it was not possible to cross here. And what they succeeded in doing is funneling all of the migration that had occurred from South Texas to California right through southern Arizona, as you all know. What to do? Well, we took the practice of civil initiative and called together folks who were involved in the sanctuary movement and began humane borders, and then some Tucson Samaritans, and then No More Deaths to provide humanitarian aid and save lives out there. And you all know how that has gone. People from here and the volunteers have had to assert one more time against all. I think volunteers with those organizations have been charged with crimes 54 times as a way of not providing humanitarian aid and saving lives. But what has happened is that we have asserted that right in court again and won all the cases except 4 who were students, volunteers over vacation and couldn't afford to come to defend themselves in court and paid a minor fine and didn't have to show up. Other than that, the courts have ruled again and again and again that human rights determine the right to provide and to receive humanitarian aid under a border enforcement strategy that has resulted in tens of thousands of deaths in our deserts. So here we are, and now, as you can tell, the military and the Immigration Service and ICE are having their way in communities unless and until communities organize to resist. Sanctuary is not a viable strategy for churches because the right of churches to be protected under United States law has been waived by this administration. the sanctuary has had to go underground, but as you know, in all of the communities and urban areas, that ICE has tried to implement apprehension and charges and detentions and deportations against people who have never committed a crime and have been a part of our communities and our churches and our organizations and our neighbors for decades now. And that will be resisted, I trust, by all of us. Thank you for your time and that long story.
Well, thank you, everybody. That was amazing. Thank you, Dora. Thank you, John. They're going to be sitting right here, so if people have questions, you can please help yourself with them. They love talking about it. It's a passion. And as Reverend Fife said, what happened in 1980 and 82 and 84 is back. And so it's just a good wake-up call. I do have one request for Dora to come back up here, because she's very involved in Humane Borders, and I think, obviously, we're not going to be, sanctuary movement is not happening. But Dora, there are other volunteers here too, can give a couple of examples of what we can do as a community to support these wonderful people coming over our borders right now, and, especially active in Humane Borders.
Thank you. And yeah, we heard the wonderful story of what has happened, but now what? What can we do together, right? We're in the middle of the 80s. We're seeing it every day, how people is being kidnapped from the streets. So as a community, we can resist by simple showing up, helping your neighbors, helping children. They are so traumatized at this moment. I am the director of an organization. It's called Salva Visión. It's a 501c3, so taxes are coming up. Because every penny that you give, it goes to save lives, to help people in our community. This is our children's in our school. Salva Visión has been around for 11 years across the border. We go wherever people go and support them. Right now, I am so honored to have here so many Salva Visión volunteers. Thank you. I mean, these people show up every day, no matter what, to drive people to school, to drive 55 boxes of food and Saturdays, to groceries to families that are so afraid to go to food banks. Now we have to drive children to school because the parents are afraid to be kidnapped while they're driving their kids to school. So there's a lot of opportunities for us as a community to engage, find an organization that, goes with your values, with your morals, with what you believe in. But it is a lot of opportunities in our community. And yes, Humane Borders continues to put water in the desert to save lives. We've seen that for 25 years. But thank you for amazing volunteers that showed up tonight. I have my crown here. We work together every day. We never stop and engage. Please find what you would like to do. And you can go to salvavision.org and you can see what we do. To some Samaritans, amazing. I'm part of the Samaritans with so much honor too, because it's the same. Everybody knows Gail here. She rides those highways and those deserts and those mountains like there's nothing. So if you want an up and down ride, call Gail because she'll take you there. But it's amazing what we do, and we gotta do this with joy. Resistance, you have to be with joy. So that way we have something to give away. Thank you.
So that's the end of our featured program. So we have questions for those who want to discuss Lido. The discussions are throughout the room, and you can just break off your own little groups and talk about those questions. And I'm going to double check on the sign-up sheet to make sure everybody's getting those. All right. But thank you, everybody. It was wonderful.